Hi, everyone. A very good afternoon to all. Thank you so much for joining us in today's webinar, where we will be discussing on revolutionize the future of smart and sustainable buildings. For those of you who are streaming in, please feel free to rename yourself, right? Here's an instruction for you with your name and company. Please mute during the session till the networking segment. And there will be great prizes to be won today where you get to participate in our quizzes and also the lucky draw prize. There are 3 lucky winners who will go home with these prizes if you stay till the end of the session. Okay, this is today's agenda where we will kick off with the opening introduction followed by a panel discussion and a presentation. And there will be quizzes and prizes to be given away during the lucky draw, and it will end off with a Q&A networking session. And for those of you who are in the mechanical engineering field, 1 PDU point will be awarded to you. Simply email your details and PE number to contact@hashtags.com for your submission. And these are the lucky draw prizes to be won. For those of you who are the first 30 to attend, today you will receive a door gift. All right, it will be an e-voucher sent to you. And later on, there will be attractive prizes if you participate in the quiz and the lucky draw. So this is today's topic where we will be discussing on revolutionize the future of smart and sustainable buildings. And these are the key 3 topics of discussion today. And I have with me Dr. James, who will be co-moderating this panel discussion with me. And Dr. James will be introducing the speakers as follows. Dr. James, to you.
Thank you, Renee. Hi, everybody. I'm the co-host for today. I'm very glad to be introducing our 4 distinguished speakers with very great credentials. First of all, we have Terence Koch. Terence has over 20 years of experience in working with digital transformation projects, including latest technologies such as web, mobile, and cloud-based technology. And he actually he's a specialist in many areas, including electronics, communication, cybersecurity, interface, sensor, and IoT, integration with IoT sensor system, as well as integration with major cloud vendor. And the purpose is to enhance infrastructure monitoring and performance analytic and visualization. He's a key player in the deployments of the IoT roadmap, end-to-end architecture, and capable of working through technical challenges by employing pragmatic solutions. He has a lot of experience in designing and developing public-facing enterprise-scale application and digital services development. Today, we'll be hearing from Terence a lot on his infrastructure planning experience. Next, we have architect Tan Su-Han. Han is an award-winning architect. Is a strategist, also a thought leader in sustainability and sustainable development. He's currently the chairman of the Singapore Institute of Architects, a professional body for architects in Singapore, and leads sustainable development at the leading global hospitality chain. Han is also appointed the World City Summit Young Leader and BCA Built Environment Young Leader. In 2021, he co-founded a non-profit organization called Innovation and Sustainability Alliance, short for IXSA, a think tank with a group of sustainable leaders. Han is also Singapore 2015 and 16 BCA SGBC Young Green Architect of the Year. Very impressive. And his portfolio includes an award-winning Park Royal on Pickering with Woha. I look forward to be there. He has spoken in numerous conferences, including Switch, the United Nations Asia Pacific Urban Forum, and COP25 in Madrid. Then we have our third speaker, Dr. Pan Chin Hong. He's currently the SVP of Fraser Property Limited, one of the largest listed integrated real estate groups in Singapore with business operation in residential, office, retail, hospitality, and industry sector. He has held different positions within the group, including group corporate planning and corporate development at Fraser Property, China. Since 2015, he has been instrumental in driving group corporate sustainability initiative and reporting. He is currently a member of the BCA Green Built Environment Advisory Committee, which is responsible for establishing Singapore Green Built Master Plan in 2021. Last but not least, we have Winston Chin from Mitsubishi Electric Asia, and he has been there since 2004. He's currently the General Manager for Building and Utility Solution. He graduated from Australia University of New South Wales with honors in electrical engineering. Winston's interest and expertise is in microgrid and solar technology, energy storage and battery, energy and building management system, critical power system, BIM, and digital twin technology for MEP, application and ventilation system for large system. A lot of terminology. And Winston has overseen and completed many projects in the APAC area, particularly in the energy and renewable sector. His current portfolio with Mitsubishi Electric includes heading up the water treatment and microgrid utility plant, rolling stock transportation business, UPS for data centers, and visual imaging business. So we're very glad to have 4 speakers. Renee, I'm going to pass the baton back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, James, for the introduction for all of these speakers. And speakers, you'll be spotlighted on screen together with us in the panel discussion. We'll have, let's have Winston, Terence, Suhan, and Dr. Pang on screen. Okay, so kindly add them on screen, Daryl. Thank you. We still have more people streaming in. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to begin our panel discussion shortly, where our speakers will be sharing on the topic on revolutionize the future of smart and sustainable buildings. Okay, we'll just make sure that all of our speakers are being spotlighted right now. Okay, all right. Now, speakers, thank you all for joining us today. Okay, I have a key question for all of you. Now, share with us, what do you think are the future trends of green and sustainable initiatives in the future of Singapore, in line with SG 2030 Green Plan and our net zero carbon emission initiatives? Let's begin with Pam, followed by Terence, followed by Han and Winston.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Guys can hear me well? Okay, all good. Yep. So when I talk about future trends on green and sustainable, initiative, I think one thing comes in mind, I think for Singapore, especially in Singapore Green Plan, is really on decarbonization, right? I think we kind of hear that more and more. I think when it comes to like the nation, Singapore want to go, net zero by somewhere middle of the century, and many more, companies, trying to embark on this journey as well. But I think this is kind of aligned to, the global kind of agenda to kind of limit our temperature rise, more than 1.5 degree by 2050. So I think that's the key trend that's kind of drive all the initiative around. So it's kind of all around this, right? And you can see that initiatives are basically largely on the 2 parts. I would kind of categorize them. One is on, the demand side. How do we manage demand when it comes to energy and indirectly kind of lower our carbon emission, right? And when it comes to reduction demand, again, I would kind of easily think that there are 2 branches that, one is really to, look at human behavior. How do we reduce consumption? I think first of all, right? And that is what I think concurrently you can see that, the Singapore Green Plan, government kind of involve many people in this journey. It's not just the built environment, but in all sectors, all industry, all stakeholders involved, whether you are, a builder, a developer, a banker, everyone is pretty much involved in this. And that's the first part. When it comes to human behavior, I think we need to kind of moderate down our kind of consumption. Secondly is, of course, the use of technology to kind of lower our demand for energy or kind of lower carbon emission from there. That's where I think we kind of talk a lot about it, in the next, 1 hour or so. The other part on the other side, I would say is on the supply side. We talk about demand and we can reduce it, but the other side we can look at supply. Can we all have the renewable energy for the whole nation, right? Probably not. I think that's the difficult part. If you look at it, how to go to net zero, the trend, either have zero consumption, which is impossible, or you have like 100% renewable energy that kind of supply to the whole nation. We kind of have to moderate the both sides. Right? And when it comes to supply, I think one key trend to look out for, I feel, is the importation of renewable energy. I think that's where I think you would hear that the government is trying to, work out some plan on that with neighboring countries, to kind of import renewable, because we don't have enough kind of space to put up renewable or solar panel, right? Even you look at the government plan to I think grow the renewable energy by 5-fold by 2050 at 2030. We're talking about only probably 3%, covering 3% of our consumption, right? So it's about the demand and supply, and when it comes to decarbonization that we try to manage. I think that's the key trend. Probably I'll just stop there.
Right, our next panelist. Terence, would you like to go next?
Hi, yeah. Thank you for attending this. I think looking forward, I'm sharing more on the technology side and the implementation. I've done quite a bit of master planning for cities outside Singapore. The trend tends to move towards the let's deal with the areas that really takes up a lot of power and energy. Of course, to go carbon neutral is the first step. It's very challenging. So we typically deal with areas in the cooling, in the data center areas. Of course, the smart grids are also a key component. These are very advanced technology where you balance the sustainable green energy versus the traditional conventional supply side, which was shared with Dr. Pang earlier. So this in the context of the countries in the region, some of the power generations are decentralized and are privately managed. So in Singapore, I think it's still managed under EMA, and I think being centrally managed, well, there are pros and cons as well. And also understanding the scale of Singapore is quite small. We can't really generate a lot of green power. So the importation of green energy is pretty much there. Let me share a bit more on the technology portion. I think moving forward, everything has to be a little more connected. Things have to be more active versus passive. I think we share a bit more later in the discussion. And I think the attitudes of life also has to change a bit in the sense that today we focus more on ownership. I think moving forward we have to understand the concept of reduce, reuse, recycle, and focus more on experience. Things about sharing as well. I think that there's a major shift in the cultural practice. Yeah. I'll reserve more of my sharing later.
Sure. How about Han?
Hi, yes, thank you so much for having me. I'll frame the response based on the 5 pillars of the Green Plan, as well as what I would suppose my expertise is in, which is in buildings. And the first pillar, of course, would be a city in nature. And that really is talking about sort of co-living and allowing our built infrastructure to become part and parcel as well of a natural environment. And I think the future really is about a combination of living with nature as well as having more comfortable built environments to live within. And I think if anything, COVID-19 has really, forced us to relook at how we treat nature, how our relationship with nature actually is, right? As well as how we can adapt better to nature, as well as all things, to do with nature. And that includes things like adapting to the circadian rhythm of the body for health. Of course, health and wellness being a major aspect now of not just living, but also working and all sorts of other activity, right? When it comes to build infrastructure. And then there's a sustainable living, the second pillar, which talks about saving resources and reducing our carbon footprint. And again, I think carbon accounting is going to be quite major when it comes to consumption, as Chin Hong has mentioned before me, but also in the design of buildings, where we look at the reduction of carbon, both by the transportation of materials, the sourcing of locally and regionally available materials, as well as finally the operations. So if you design your buildings optimally, they too will be operated optimally as well. And that means creating very efficient environments in which we can reduce not just carbon, but all the other things, all the other emissions that also comes with it, right? So that's sustainable living. The third pillar would be energy reset, and that's basically using cleaner energy and increasing energy efficiency. So it does tie in with the previous aspect of sustainable living. And I think with, again, sort of heightened demand control technologies and also AI, which should actually come in and predetermine and also preempt consumption patterns, and also, for example, in the case of, once again, COVID, allowing fresh air exchange to happen in an intelligent manner based on occupancy and based on carbon sensing. That too can sort of optimize the energy performance of the building, right? And of course, architecturally speaking, there's aspects of passive design as well. How do we best interact with nature? How do we best make use of the geography of the building, or the geography of where the building is sited, in order to reduce as much air conditioning and lighting as possible? And the fourth pillar would be green economy. So harnessing sustainability as a mode of, as a new engine of jobs and growth. So all these earlier pillars and all these earlier opportunities will themselves create, I think, new intelligence, I would say, and new, let's say, a new hive mind, a new ground source of expertise when it comes to sustainable technologies. And that too could sort of build upon each other and improve the state of the green economy, right? As well as the state of technology. And finally, the last pillar, of course, being green government. And we'll see a lot of government initiatives, even grants that we can then tap upon. We'll see examples of government taking forth, this whole leadership when it comes to sustainability and when it comes to green infrastructure as well. So that's basically the public sector taking the lead on sustainability, right? So I think with all this in hand, it does prove to be quite an exciting future when it comes to green technologies. But all this, of course, needs the participation of not just the building experts, not just the infrastructural experts, not just all of us in this room, but also the end user, right? So the end user needs to be eventually educated on how best to use, to operate, and to maximize the potentials of technology as well as build infrastructure.
Right. Thank you so much, Swan, for your sharing. Winston, your turn.
Right. Thank you, Swan, and thank you, Dr. Pang and Terence. Well, I think basically when we look at Singapore context itself, government has set the targets of meeting the zero emission targets at 2050, and people are talking more about renewable energy and as a future trend. But we're seeing the possibility of, say, hydrogen technology, but these are still in the R&D stage. Wind, basically, we don't have really much wind in our region. But what we see here is there's a really good pickup of solar energy as the main source of renewable energy for Singapore. And we think that basically the commercial buildings and building owners probably can do their part to implement solar energies on their roof itself, installing solar panels. To me, it's basically a no-brainer because of the cost of solar has decreased significantly, while the cost of grid electricity you're buying from Power Grid or any other open market retailer has increased. As of today, I think we are paying something like 26 cents against last year, comparing last year, which we are paying 18 to 19 cents. And we see that the trend is actually the cost of electricity will rise, and it's basically anyone who has a roof, be it your factory facility, your homes, your landed property, it's a no-brainer to actually install solar, because the return is in fact 3 years for commercial building, and we're looking at 4 to 5 years for landed properties, right? And on the other hand, government is also looking at the EV, the electric vehicle. During the one of the budget speech by Finance Minister Lawrence Wong, in last year, around 4% of the vehicles are electric car. And we take figures from LTA, we're seeing the EV or population actually doubled from 1,200 in 2020 to 3,000 last year. So we see that the trend is to actually push forward EV, to get EV more available to Singaporeans. But we also have to look into how can EV be sustainable? How can we have the infrastructure in place? As you know, EV, we need the charging stations, and we need enough power to actually sustain EV. And as Terence mentioned about digital transformation as well, and the key technologies will be also impacting on the data center. Data centers are coming in. We also have to look into how to sustain and provide the energy for such a new industry, booming industry like data center. Yeah, so I think the future trend of going green and sustainable is basically very bright for Singapore and Singaporeans. And I think today we are here to basically share more ideas and discuss about the future of Singapore green planning. Yeah, thank you.
Wow, fantastic. I mean, we've got several pointers here from how we should moderate our consumption, demand, supply, talk about city in nature, living with nature, health and wellness, sustainable living, talk about energy reset, how you could integrate AI, right, and preempt consumption patterns in energy usage, how we can build this green economy, and how we can involve the government, the public sector, to take the lead in driving these initiatives. And thanks for sharing also, Winston, on solar energy and the use of, and also the push of the use of EV cars moving forward, and how we can build an infrastructure to support that, and also data centers to sustain energy. Now, so these are the key pointers that we, in one question, you guys, wow, have shared so much. Next thing would be, what are some of the success stories globally, which, you think Singapore can learn from and implement? Yeah. Let's start with Terence, followed by Dr. Pang, Sohan, and then Winston.
Let me share with more on the concept of district cooling. We've done a couple of projects outside Singapore. I think there's 2 or 3 projects that's quite successful in Singapore in the district cooling as well. I think Dr. Pang will share a bit more so later. And given the right sizing and the consumption patterns, district cooling has seen to contribute considerable savings in the size of cooling. Cooling consumes close to 40% of our energy investments or costs. So, but unfortunately, district cooling is not for every sector. How you wish that every HDB estate will have a centrally district cooling, and we no longer need to buy our air cons anymore. That's not going to work. So so one of the most successful would be the Marina Bay Financial Centers. I think it has been well implemented, has no issues, and the savings has been enjoyed across the board. The other sector comes also with the enhancement, I would say the improvisation of how data centers are being managed compared to what we have seen many, many years ago. I think the new concepts, I think there are opportunities here as well, will be what I call kind of where the data centers are no longer replacing all their servers in a whole, they will be replacing things in parts. And I think Intel has led the initiative in such that you can just change the processor components, the RAM components, so on. So instead of dumping the whole entire power supply and then half the rack being changed. So that is a very important initiative that actually saves also a considerable amount, that's more than 20%. Most importantly, in the cooling technology, hasn't been implemented in many places, but as you realize with the rise of cryptos and the cloud computing, the demand for data centers is very high. It used to be like 14 kilowatts per rack, and we are now looking at close to 150 kilowatts per rack.
Finish your inspection already. Oh,
sorry. Yeah. So understanding that intense amount of consumption per rack, the traditional means of cooling is not possible. It's totally impossible. So some of the new technology, probably some of you heard it, is called direct cooling. And the more extreme one would be a total immersion cooling, where the entire server is soaked into a kind of a non-conductive liquid for cooling. And that actually saves, probably can save close to 80% of the space used in data center as well as the cooling as well. So we probably will see more of such a deployment coming forward. Yeah, thank you.
Right, thanks for sharing on the cooling technology, district cooling. Okay, next, Dr. Pang.
Yep. I'll probably want to touch on district cooling maybe at a later stage, but I just want to highlight that when we talked about success stories that we can learn globally, maybe on the non-technological side, I think we kind of mentioned just now, in Singapore, government is leading, the public sector is leading. And I think not necessary. If you look at, globally, I think many successful implementation of sustainability actually doesn't come from the government. It can come from the private sector. I think Australia is a very good example of, the private sectors, the industry is driving, I think more than what the government, has been pushing, right? You look at, there's political kind of issues in Australia, you have your mining industry you need to kind of take care of. At the same time, you look at sustainability. But you look at how the private sector has kind of pushed their way into, even to build some of the carbon neutral, buildings or properties around. And the industry is just doing it, without the government support. In Australia, if you remember a couple of years ago, they introduced carbon tax. Within 1-2 years, they scrap it, political, whatever the issue was, there's no carbon tax in Australia versus in Singapore. We've been pushing carbon tax, recently, as you can see, much higher, than the current tax. So again, I think when it comes to successful story, I feel that, the mindset of the people, I think that's very important. Technological wise, of course, I think that would definitely help in terms of what I think we mentioned just now, reducing the emissions, or kind of look at the supply side, how to kind of make it clean. Yeah. So Australia, I feel that's a good example that I think we all can kind of learn. We can all do it, not necessarily we need to wait for the government. I'll probably stop there.
So private sector taking the lead instead. Wow, okay, how about Swan?
Yeah, so what are the success stories globally which Singapore can learn from? I think we're no longer in a situation where we, as in Singapore or even in Southeast Asia, basically can go, oh, okay, this is what the world's doing, so this is what we must do to keep up with the times. I think it's now the global economy has become so pervasive, right? And there's no such thing as geographical boundaries anymore. When it comes to technologies, when it comes to sharing of information, and when it comes to adaptability as well. And this is pretty clear, I think, in the private sector here as well, where you have a lot of international companies being consultants to even local infrastructure. I think, of course, Terrence representing Meinhardt is one clear example, right? This is sort of as a Singapore company. Having said that, there's also plenty of Singaporean companies. Chin Hong, for example, working with Frasers, and of course, so many of us in this room as well, working with companies that do a lot of overseas projects and bring so much of our tried and tested and proven technologies in Singapore overseas as well. So with that as a bit of a preamble, I still am going to answer the question. And I think architecturally speaking, we've always drawn a lot of reference from a lot of the I think international architects. There's so many good examples of international architecture in Singapore as well, and vice versa. Singaporeans also doing very good work overseas. An example of something that could be an inspiration is this whole rapidly assembled and disassembled modular buildings. For example, the projects of the Japanese, architects such as Shigeru Ban, who work out of recycled paper tubes. And if you Google the guy and the kind of work he does, there's actually quite a few amazing examples of rapidly deployable architecture, which becomes, I think, very relevant either in extreme conditions or in rapid conditions where you need to set up buildings fairly quickly, for example, in emergency situations or in disaster relief. So that's one example. And it's something that we, I think in Singapore, can also build upon. Not that we have natural disasters, touch wood, but it could become an exportable service and exportable, I suppose, talent pool as well. But when it comes to things like prefabrication, there's tons of examples of American and European examples, for example, in prefabricated homes. And if you think about it, that too can be quite sustainable in terms of the reduction of on-site carbon, right? So again, depending on where it's assembled and where it needs to be transported, you could manage the carbon credits. I suppose it could manage the carbon expense, I would say, in the construction of these homes as well. On the urban infrastructure level, there's the Dutch examples of polders. The whole country of the Netherlands is below their average mean sea level. And as a result, they had to build some sort of infrastructure along the boundaries of the Dutch islands as well. And that basically combats the rising sea levels, and is things that I think in Singapore we're also looking at in collaboration with our Dutch counterparts and fellow consultants. There's also underground flood infrastructure or flood retention tanks, these giant infrastructure in Tokyo, which is a bit of an urban resilience type of infrastructure, wherein if there's actually any floods, it does fill up some of these tanks underground. There's also a highway in Kuala Lumpur, which is underground, that takes on some of these excess sort of overflow of water as well, right? That could, temporarily at least be some mode of relief for some of the disaster operations or disaster mitigation operations. And finally, I think in terms of the urban smart infrastructure or IT infrastructure, we've got examples such as the Songdo Smart City in Korea, which is sort of a closed loop smart city system as well, which talks about energy management and resource all the way down to surveillance as well as data sharing. And that too can be, examples that we can take from as we develop Singapore as a smart city. But conversely, we too have quite a bit of good examples to share with the world as well. District cooling being examples that were quite heavily mentioned previously by Terence as well as Dr. Pang. I think, when it comes to desalination or marina barrage, when it comes to green buildings, there's a lot of good examples of green projects, green buildings, where not just greenery is implemented onto a building, but where we also look at aspects of wellness, once again, healthy buildings, as well as our public park infrastructures, our cycling path networks. I think all that can be good examples as well as we export our services overseas, right? And I think what would make it really successful if we lift the global crop of buildings, the global crop of infrastructure, such that every building in the world, every new building can be a green building and can be an energy efficient one, right? So yeah, that's what I have for the moment. More to come, hopefully.
Wow, thank you, Suhan. From recycled paper tubes all the way down to flood retention tanks for disaster mitigation operations to urban smart infrastructure and green buildings. So thank you so much for your sharing. And Winston, your turn.
Right. So what are the smart urban infrastructure plans to consider for the future of SG? Probably just like to focus on what Terence has mentioned. regarding the data centers, implementation of data centers. He touched a bit on the cooling part of the data center. We are also looking at the energy part, which like the backup power. So we are looking at the UPS systems and the battery technologies, conventional battery technologies like lead acid and the conventional UPS systems has a much bigger footprint itself. So what we can learn from the counterparts in the US and Japan is to have a smaller footprint, to use latest technology, lithium-ion battery systems being one of them. They are deployed in EV as well as in data center. So we're seeing more and more such data center technology being implemented in the region here in Singapore and Southeast Asia. But there are other battery technologies that we can bring into Singapore. Example like zinc ion and what we have nickel zinc itself. As you may know, for the lithium ion, there is the danger factor of having this fire issues. But we look at other technologies in the market, whereby if you can implement nickel zinc itself, then we can actually reduce the fire issues, as well as having a smaller footprint, has good capabilities of fast discharge and and charging systems. So, and in terms of the cooling factor itself, if you implement new technologies of nickel zinc, you don't need that much of a cooling, whereby because nickel zinc itself can work at a temperature efficiently, rather than traditional lead acid or the lithium ion battery systems. Yeah, so in terms of technology, we can see that can in fact bring in this new technologies for data center to contribute to this future of the Singapore market. Yeah, probably we'll speak more later on other topics. Yeah.
Right. So thank you so much for sharing the battery technologies, how we can, produce smaller footprint, carbon footprint, right, with the latest technology. Right. Thank you. And on the next question, as we know that external environment can impact internal environment. So how can we redefine urban workplaces with green and sustainable solutions to increase productivity? All right. Let's see, who wants to start first? Okay, I'm not gonna pinpoint.
I can go first.
All right,
Quick
thank you,
one.
Terence.
Yeah. Although I do most master planning work, but there are very interesting solutions that I think can help pretty much. Early on, I mentioned the use of sensors. I think today a lot more sensors are being deployed. People counting sensors, use sensors, and so on. So I think with the COVID situation, a lot of offices are not heavily utilized, and I think after this situation, the offices are likely to downscale while maintaining the same level of efficiency and effectiveness. So I think the smarter office and hot desking options are likely to take place. In the sense that we would probably have need to have better management of the use of space, so that we can reduce the size of office while also ensuring that they are properly used. On the again, back to the heating and smart cooling again, I think just now Sahan has mentioned also the use of occupancy awareness cooling system is going to take place. So it gets smarter. I think Mitsubishi has some very interesting technologies. So the new aircons that they have, they can actually count the number of people in a room, and then they decide the amount of fresh air and cooling requirements to put in. So of course, when you expand that to a larger ACMB system, then it would help in a larger sense. So you can know which sector has how many people. Unfortunately, today most of the ACMB systems are not designed that manner. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for the market to redesign, relook, and then have the kind of resolution needed to have a more adaptive ACMB systems for reduction of energy. Yeah, I think I'll leave the floor to the rest.
Okay, Suhan.
Wow. Okay. I think I'll try to angle this from a bit of the softer aspect, right? And by soft, I literally mean the softscape aspect, where we can incorporate more plants and more greenery into our building environments, into our workspace environments as well. And I think there's, well, whether you believe it or not, there are theories that sort of elucidate that, you know, biophilia or biophilic environments do indeed help the mental wellness situation quite a bit, right? The moment you have visual access and physical access to greens, it brings you closer to nature, it makes you more calm. And of course, the whole sort of transpiration of plants and the whole air exchange as they photosynthesize would also sequester some of the carbon, you know, some of the carbon dioxide, and therefore make your air fresher as well, right? Of course, all this depends on how much and how dense the planting really is. But yeah, I think biophilic environments are also environments that respond to your circadian rhythm. So if you happen to be in an office which has no direct access to windows, then maybe the lighting simulation can actually be sort of programmed and be calibrated such that, you know, maybe by this time at about 5:15 in the afternoon, it turns into a nice shade of warm pink, right? Similar to a sunset type of a lighting situation, and you go, okay, it's almost time to leave. Not yet, because I think the seminar runs till 6 p.m., right? But allowing the lighting to sort of change in response to your circadian rhythm and allowing your body to tune itself as well to what is natural, even if artificially simulated. So access to fresh air as well. I think fresh air, of course, now with the COVID situation also becomes a very, I think, significant aspect where, you know, we're not just looking at buildings anymore in terms of reducing the sick building syndrome. We're really looking at fresh air in terms of preserving a healthy environment and purging sort of secondary air outside of the building, right? Or rather to the outside of the building. But it's not just about what's within the building, it's also about the urban infrastructure that allows it. So I think so much of urban planning also looks at the reasonable as well as accessible distance from a building or from an urban environment to a green environment. So you hear about 15-minute cities or 20-minute cities where, you know, within a certain radius, within a 15 or 20-minute walk, you can access your parks, you can access, you know, all your amenities, you can do your shopping, you can go to work, right? So all this also plays a part in what is a healthy work environment. And finally, again, back to the earlier question, are offices still relevant, you know, post-pandemic? I think we're also used to working from home. We're also used to a hybrid working environment now. And I think it's not just about the physical design of the buildings anymore. It's really about the flexibility in allowing remote work conditions and allowing hybrid work conditions, wherein I think your state of wellness also is an accessibility to your family. Although maybe if you're a parent, you want to be away from your kids and sort of hide out in the office, right? But there's so much of wellness, there's so much of your welfare that's to do with the people you're with as well, right? So hybrid working environments allows you maybe to avoid your colleagues 3 days a week, right? Maybe that gives you wellness, or conversely, to avoid your family 2 days a week, and maybe that too gives you a better working environment and a better mental health, right? So I think urban workspaces is going to be one of the major aspects of study. It's going to be one of the major things that are going to be changing downstream. Yeah.
Yep. So I kind of wanted to jump in here. I think I totally concur with what Zan and Terence have kind of shared. I think when it comes to you know, workplace, it's all about, you know, not just we talk about sustainability, green, but the other part of it is the wellness that within the building that, you know, Zan has touched on. And when it comes to, you know, current workplace, I think one thing we can't avoid is, you know, we look at, you know, we talk about sensor just now, IoT, Terence mentioned that. It's all about data analytics and ultimately having the data able to kind of drive sustainability or kind of increase productivity. So the monitoring platform is very important in, you know, most of our workplaces, right? You know, nowadays, and we talk about, you know, whether how much space you need, you know, from the data analytics, sensor IoT, you can basically plan it, right? And from that, I think we kind of move on to how, companies or organization can kind of cut down space through, hot desking. I think that's the one that kind of more and more kind of hear organization kind of implement that. The other one is about, we're in a sharing economy, co-working space. You don't really need the fixed rented space anymore nowadays. You go to co-working space. There are many brands out there. You can just tap on wherever you want to work. In various part of the town, there's co-working space. You just check in, check out, wherever you want to. I think that flexibility, I think, is the trend that we could see in workplaces. And the flexible work arrangement, I think Zan touched on that. That is increasingly the trend itself. From our side, phrases, we also do have flexible work arrangement. Whether have COVID or no COVID, we do have that arrangement. How many days can work from home or from anywhere, right? So that basically, I will see the trend itself.
Right. Yeah, thanks, Ching Hong. I agree with everyone. So in terms of the office workspace area, Mitsubishi Electric is also doing a 3-day week, 2-day at home and 3 days in the office. And as Terence mentioned about sensor technology, which is part of the building management systems. We, Mitsubishi Electric, we basically like a hardware shop itself. We have elevators, we have air conditioning systems, and we are trying to put them together in a BMS system, whereby we are exploring collecting data. For example, we have elevators and we measure the weight of elevators at each level. And we can actually collect data of how many people leaving that particular floor, getting into the building of that floor. And at the same time, we can correlate that relationship with air conditioning system. So in a sense, we will know how many people are at that particular level, particular floor. And then in the way we feed back the data to the aircon systems, and we actually adjust the air conditioning temperature, speed. So in a way, we're making the wellness for our employees, as well as to create that sort of a comfort and convenience to employees. So we are actually currently doing this in our own Mitsubishi Electric building. So basically, such a technology whereby utilizing the different aspect of the products that we have, we can actually develop a full-scale complete solution to improve the building itself, to make the building smarter, to make the building more productive and more efficient. Yeah. Right.
Right, thank you. So on this question where you have shared, the panel has shared from topics related to sensors to incorporating biophilic environment to help improve mental well-being, right? And about hybrid working, right? Co-working spaces, and how you could leverage on data analytics to monitor usage of energy. And I'd like to pass this on, the baton, to Dr. James. Well, there are some critical questions on technology and innovation. Please feel free, James. Yeah.
Thank you, Renee. Very exciting to hear from all four speakers. Given the amount of time left, I thought I actually have two major questions to ask all the panel. I've been rethinking about the question as I listen to you all. One question actually is a big question. Another question is a very small question. Right? Here, I start with the big question first, right? Many years ago, I was outside Singapore. When I heard about sustainability, we all talk about the major infrastructure project called district cooling in Singapore, right? Which is like the flagship, It's like people looking at the Marina Bay as an icon, etc. Right? I'm just curious, just hearing from all of you, in the industry, what would be the top 1 or top 3 infrastructure urban project in Singapore, where some years down the road, people is going to say that this is what Singapore has actually made a breakthrough to show the world what we have done, right? So that's a big question, right? It has to be top 1 or top 3 is okay. It's up to you to decide, and it kind of tell us quickly why, you know. I think any one of you feel free to answer. I think Dr. Pang is ready. I can feel it. I can feel that he's dying to tell us the story.
Thanks so much, Dr. James Ong. You know, I think I want to touch on, I think we kind of talked about district cooling so much from the start until now. You know, I just want to make sure that everyone understand the concept of district cooling first. You know, just give me a minute on that, you know, how district cooling work, you know, just for the benefits of everyone. You know, for the most simplistic, we always have, you know, a split unit aircon, like, you know, Winston will share, you know, Mitsubishi kind of aircon. You know, we have, you know, kind of innovated from there in terms of, you know, the efficiency of even split unit aircon. Now, if you even have, I think probably 5 ticks, right? So it's very efficient. But how we actually move into even more efficient aircon system is the centralized, you know, aircon system like we have in each of the building, powered by one aircon chiller system, right? So that is even more efficient. Now we talk about district cooling. So for the benefits of all, you know, district cooling means that many buildings in one district powered by one aircon chiller system, that kind of provide the chilled water to all buildings, one system for many buildings, right? So again, that actually was a game changer. You look at, I think, a couple of years ago, how United Nations mentioned about district cooling. It's called the secret weapon to combat climate change. Because you look at our carbon emission, by and large, actually came from the cooling and heating globally, right? So this is the major breakthrough that we're looking at, you know, when it comes to aircon system, you know, district cooling. And I want to share with you the Singapore example that one day I think can apply to everywhere. You know, we talk about district cooling just now, like the whole Marina Bay Sands, Meridian Bay Financial Center, ORQ, they all powered by, you know, what we call that greenfield district cooling. So before you build anything, you build the system underground. When every building come out, you connect the pipe to all the building, you got the aircon, you know, up and running. But in Singapore, we are currently piloting, which Fraser's is very much involved going forward. There's a town called Tampines, right, in Singapore, where there are like 14 commercial buildings around that. You know, it's a build-up. It's a brownfield. The buildings has been there 10, 20 years. And we are trying to do a district cooling on the brownfield. You know, all buildings are up, all have their own, what we call that, chiller system. You know, it's all there. But, you know, there's some proposal that came from, you know, if you read the news last year, all the building owners are coming together to do this district cooling. So what it means by we're connecting pipes across all buildings, and we are sharing the chiller plant. And we did feasibility study, basically this SP and, you know, Temasek kind of initiative to bring 14 buildings together, see who has probably the most efficient chiller plant, can provide, you know, chilled water, you know, to all buildings, basically aircon to all other buildings, you know. So managing that, you know, I'm proud to say that, you know, Fraser's out of, I think, 3 injecting node, you know, that kind of provide chilled water. 3 buildings are basically 2 comes from our properties, Century Square and Tampines 1 mall, and that we can provide to other buildings. I think thanks to the chiller, you know, system that we have over there, we're able to do that. And with just this initiative, the feasibility study is indicating that we could cut down 18% of carbon emission of the 14 buildings, you know, versus business as usual, right? And this is the first ever brownfield district cooling in Singapore. If this can be, you know, done well, it could be replicated in other towns in Singapore. And the whole, you know, the whole solution can kind of be replicated and be learned in other countries as well, you know. So I think it's a great, you know, solution that we're all looking for, that I'm quite eager to share.
Wow,
Thanks for
fascinating. I hope we can scale it to the entire island and show the world what we can do, right?
Yep.
I'm curious from Winston, Taryn, you guys have anything to talk about? What is your top one project in Singapore, right? Yeah, game changer.
I would like to share probably on the Gardens by the Bay, and then that's one of Meinhardt's projects. A lot of thought has been put in to ensure that it's the kind of a net zero, where we have a collection of rainwater. In fact, I want to mention this earlier, but I didn't have a chance to talk too much on technology. Probably Zehan will have more to say on that. Collection of rainwater is something that has not been actively done. Of course, you need a lot of certifications, a lot of preparations for that. But in the long term, it has a lot of potentials for helping in probably rooftop gardening, hydroponics, and so on. So I think Garden by the Bay have done rainwater, and that was translated to Jewel. Jewel was even more amazing as a project for the world to see. So plenty of sensors there. The whole building is literally breathing, and every part of it, even a slight vibration in the escalator will tell you that you need some predictive maintenance going on. So AI is everywhere. A lot of new innovations there that they can count number of people in the toilets without having a camera there, and that innovation has went on to many places. Also, that technology also originated from Mitsubishi. Yeah.
Wow. Any other example from Winston or architect Han?
Yeah, Winston here. I just want to share a little bit on what Ching Hong and Terence has mentioned. So basically, BCA sets the target to achieve like 80% of building by gross floor area to be green by year 2030. Yeah, so both of them have mentioned about the large-scale deployment of this chiller system, district cooling. But when we talk about the smaller buildings itself, I think if we look at sizes that are 10,000 square meters, I think it's now probably mandatory to just only install the water cool chill systems. And when we talk about sizes that are 10,000 square meter below, which is less than 500 ton peak cooling capacity, right, we might not be able to use the more conventional VRF system or the lower efficiency air cool chiller system. We are looking at that's actually for the more than 10,000 square meter, but less than 10,000 square meter. We are now looking at the air cool chiller system, and as well as the air cool VRF systems. So this area, I think, if it's equipped with the conventional basic BMS systems, you can actually do the scheduling and alarm settings and predictive and preventive maintenance for the building itself. In that way, in fact, that will be able to support the government achieving the 2030 target for having the 80% buildings of gross floor area to be green. If we talk about district cooling, I think right at the moment, it's still quite impossible to implement on a large scale basis for everyone, because there are many individual buildings. It's difficult to gather everybody together. But we'll see in the shorter term, I think air cool chiller system and air cool VRF system will be the way to go still for the next 10 years. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Suhan, you want to have anything there? Your top number one project in Singapore?
Well, I'll talk in a bit more of generic terms. And one of the things that's coming our way as an entire building crop is this thing called the Resource Sustainability Act from the Ministry of Sustainability and the Environment. And the RSA actually looks at how best to deal with food waste as well as packaging waste. And this, when you see it in tandem with what's happening in Singapore with regards to the new budget, with regards to the green plan, and what it means for carbon taxing and the reduction of carbon. If you put two and two together, you basically go, hey, look, while everyone is talking about carbon and everyone's talking about district cooling and all these sexy bits of engineering, that translate directly towards carbon credits, and therefore people want to get into it because they think if you translate it to carbon credits and you save these carbon credits, it leads to savings or better yet profits, right? If you steer away from that, not that it's not important, that is absolutely important, as my colleagues in this call have shared. What's also equivalently important is basically the removal of waste in a way that is environmentally friendly. And that's an age-old problem, right? Back in the medieval times, before sanitation systems and so on were designed, that was already an issue, and therefore Da Vinci and his folks came in with new sanitation systems for the Renaissance period, and that's been taken as urban planning norms, right, for the centuries since. But if we start looking at how we start to remove our waste materials now, I think one of the next big technologies that's going to be implemented are precinct level waste removal technologies, and that includes pneumatic waste systems, right? People don't want to talk about it because it's smelly, it's dirty, and it's ugly, right? But it needs to be talked about because waste is going to be one huge problem if we don't deal with it. And that discussion, especially on plastic waste, was really picking up until about 2019 and 2020. And one of the companies I had the opportunity and the pleasure of being involved in was a company called MiniWist that turns recycled plastic waste into renewable products and upcycled products. But all of a sudden, that discussion sort of disappeared when it came to the pandemic, because all of a sudden, everyone wants hygienic things once again. So everything's packed in packages, all your ART kits are made of plastic, and there's going to be a huge wave of new plastic waste that's going to come about, not from bottles anymore, not from the little 6-pack plastic holders for beers that are strangling turtles in the ocean, but from our ART kits and all these things that we're using as a result of the pandemic, right? Likewise with the masks and the bands and so on that's being used. So if there's a way of buildings to actually allow for source segregation, right? And the source segregation would allow at the downstream level for all these waste to then be segregated and then recycled individually. I think that's one low-tech aspect of actually dealing with waste. A high-tech aspect is to use AI to start determining what kind of waste comes out of the building, right? And therefore, how it can actually be sorted as well. So with AI, you can determine what type of waste it is, identify the material properties. If it's metallic and it's magnetic, you can use electromagnets to start sort of segregating it. If not, you can use other modes of filtration systems. And at the end, the city and the precinct and the overall municipality would need to have the infrastructure to recycle all these different wastes through their different properties as well. Yeah, so I think as much as energy is important, so too is waste. And of course, the third aspect, of course, is food, right? The moment we solve the food problem, I think half of the world's problems will also be solved. And likewise with food waste, right? How do we channel useful food that's still not being used into useful purposes, right? How do we distribute some of this food waste downstream as well before it actually gets thrown away, right? So I think these are things that are going to be quite prime in our conversations in the next 3 to 4 years, right? And I think it would be really interesting if projects really start thinking about this beyond just the energy equation.
Thank you.
Not discounting, of course, the importance of energy, of course.
Okay, thank you. I've taken note all the things that you guys have mentioned. Renee, do we have time for one quick question or?
Okay, you can shoot your question. For the rest of the Q&As that come by, we will leave it to the end during the networking Q&A towards the end of the session. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to end with a very quick question. Actually, I mentioned there's a big one and a small one. The one I asked was a big one, infrastructure. I'm going to ask a small one. A small one means that I want to give the 4th speaker an opportunity to do something called call for action. We have audience here, and then what are the things that for us individually, right? Or as a small business, or as an executive or leader in the business, what we can do today, right? Simple technology, simple habit change, right? Because I think Suhan mentioned about this waste management, right? I've been to Japan, I was in China, in Shanghai, they were actually implementing very good individual at home waste separation, people are disciplined. I don't see that in Singapore. We go to the shopping mall, retail shop, people take a lot of plastic bag, right? For example. So all four of you are expert in this area. What would be the call for action you recommend for our audience, basically? Anyone?
Can I just quickly share? I'm partially involved in the new upcoming IWMF project, which is the integrated waste management facility. So yes, I also questioned the same question a couple of years ago. Why are we not separating our waste and making that nicely. But unfortunately, the statistics come back at that it is really disappointing. The waste separation project isn't very successful, and more than 40% of the waste are all in the wrong basket. So the new centers are using technology, AI, and so on, has very effective way to split up plastic, metals, and food waste and so on. So and I think a lot of investment has went in. I think some exciting plans or breakthrough you're going to see from Singapore. I can't share too much from this point onwards, but something
Okay.
good. Yeah.
How about Winston or Dr. Pang? Any one suggestion, call for action for all of us to go back and start doing?
Right. I think again, as a hardware seller, you sell air conditioning, fans, and things like that. Not that we want to promote, but I think we should use efficient air conditioning systems, efficient appliances in our homes. So I think it's best you check the labels and you select the home equipment, the appliances with more energy saving sticks itself. And I think on the other hand, you have to use water wisely. Basically, every drop of water counts. And for Mitsubishi Electric, PUB is also our key customers, and they are using our water technology, our ozone generator. Basically, if you drink from the tap itself, you don't have a taste or smell that is a bad taste or a nasty taste or nasty smell. This is also due to the PUB implementing the ozone generators for their water treatment plant to get rid of the smell and to get rid of the bad taste itself. So I think Singaporeans should treasure what the government sector has done for all of us to in fact, to provide us the best, the cleanest water, available energy, electricity 24 hours. No browning and things like that happen, touch wood, happen in the past 3-4 years. We never see that happening. So we should be very thankful, and on our part, we should play a part in conserving energy. Our behavior, our patterns, our daily life itself should actually we should use the way we use energy. We should spare a thought, and we should actually return back to the nature. Yeah.
Okay, Winston, I'm going to call you for a discount coupon to upgrade my air conditioner at home. Maybe Dr. Pang or Suhan, anyone call for actions?
Sure. Yeah, maybe myself. I think that no action is too small. I think we should all start from, somewhere. It's about, sometimes about. I think piloting. I think new solution. Do not be afraid. Just start somewhere. And to kind of to start somewhere or to pilot new things. Maybe we need partnering. Collaboration. I think that's important. Don't do it alone. I don't think you would kind of struggle if you cannot do alone. You have limited knowledge, limited technology. Just try to get out there, get partners. Doing it. And when it comes to organization, I think the call for action is probably. I think you could see that business model has been changing. We are in the sharing economy today. A lot of things you don't need to purchase. Nowadays you can buy aircon as a service, buy lighting as a service, buy or rent office space as a service. Like co-working space. I'll talk about that, right? So again, kind of innovate and business the model. I think there should be a win-win situation for both sides of the businesses, right? When we talk about that, and when it comes to personal. In terms of call for action, I think all of us should kind of monitor our own consumption, whether it's electricity, energy, or water, or even to kind of look at how we handle waste. I think we talked about it just now. Yeah.
Han?
Yeah, I think again, just echoing Dr. Pang as well. There's no action that's too small. is always your problem, not someone else's problem. It's our collective problem as a generation, right? So when it comes to waste, of course, manage your consumer habits, right? Maybe drop your fast fashion habits. Think about mixing and matching a wardrobe a bit more, right? So you wear your piece of clothing for more than the average 7 times in its life cycle, right? And that's how many times you wear one piece of clothing before you throw it away on average. When it comes to the actual use of materials and so on as well, reduce, say, for example, your printing. And I think within the past year, I've only printed maybe about 5 sheets of paper. That tends to be quite challenging, I think, in the architectural and engineering sphere, but it is possible, right? Because we're using all sorts of digital tools and the ability to sort of study scale of drawings and so on through these digital tools as well. So you can actually reduce printing, and it's possible to not have a printer, right? Except when you need to print visas and COVID certificates and whatnot. So that's literally the 5 pieces of paper I printed over the past year. When it comes to accounting for your own carbon and also your own waste, I think there's multiple carbon calculation apps that are available, right? So just to understand your own personal ecological footprint. And when I say ecological footprint, it is conscious because we can't just look at our carbon footprint because there's so many more things that we're doing to the environment beyond carbon that's actually damaging the environment, right? That includes what types of phosphorus and nitrogen and all these other elements we're putting back. Not that these elements themselves are harmful, but if we change the balance of these elements, then the whole sort of natural ecological balance gets out of whack, right? It's no longer sort of equivalent in the natural scheme of things. So just identifying some of these and how we can sort of cut back, right? I'm not preaching a life of non-access. I'm not sort of preaching no luxuries in life, right? I mean, after 2 years of pandemic, we all need our luxuries, but at least be conscious. And I think conscious luxury and conscious consumption is still very much possible.
Excellent. Wow. All the call for action are very inspiring. I'm sure a lot of us will change our behavior and habits after this. Thank you very much. I want to pass this back to Renee.
All right. Thank you so much, panelists. Let's give them a round of applause.